Welcome to the Spirit of Healing. People look for healing throughout their lives. Today we have two people who have found some answers, and they've written books. Today we're going to discuss this with Dr. Phil Shapiro and Frank Coppieters. And we'll start with Dr. Phil Shapiro. You're a psychiatrist and a spiritual seeker. Why hasn't traditional medical school and psychiatry been enough for you?
Well, in medical school, I would say I was studying very hard and perfectly miserable. And that was the case a good deal of the time before and after medical school. So I became a seeker of knowledge of any kind that would help me get through my pain and problems. I went through the traditional psychotherapies and found some answers, but it wasn't sufficient. So my life led me to look deeper into the realm of spirituality, and I studied the great books and the great saints and sages and gurus and teachers and masters, and discovered the connection between the psychological and the spiritual, and merged the two and began to get the knowledge that I needed to begin to settle down.
Can you talk a little bit more about that connection between the two? What is the connection?
Well, the mind and the body and the soul are in the same space, and they are merged, like you could use the metaphor like a marble cake. And in many ways they're inseparable. They overlap, and yet we speak about them separately in order to create a model or a category. So what goes on in the mind connects to the spirit and soul, and what goes on in the soul and spirit connects to the mind and then to the body, and it swirls around in every direction.
Okay. And what is mind-body medicine?
Mind-body medicine has to do with the power of belief in connection to biology. In every cell in the body there's an omniscient, absolutely brilliant, impeccable healing power that operates the cells and heals the cells when they're in trouble. It's incomparably brilliant. What most people don't know is that we can make it grow. Mind-body medicine has to do with positioning the mind in such a way that the healing power is facilitated, as opposed to allowing the mind to do what it would if otherwise left unattended, playing all the tricks that it does on us, and that dwindles the healing power. So mind-body medicine is the study of becoming conscious of what the mind is up to and shifting it from negative to positive and from positive to stillness, where the joy and the peace and the love exist. And when those qualities are cooking, the cells love it.
Is there any evidence that this works, that this type of thing?
Well, what's interesting is that what I said is somewhat of a theory, and you know, the intuitive way of saying it is that something happens electrically, magnetically, and chemically in the body that in some way in the cells has leverage that has to do with disease and healing and pain management. It remains a theory until there's some data. Now, recently there has been a collection of ample scientific data that people who have an active faith or belief system have better outcomes in medicine, surgery, mental health, and addiction. So that once this truth came through, then in medicine now, in most medical schools, there are classes, and some have institutes and clinics that are helping people learn how to do these mind-body medicine practices so that we can expand the healing power and do better when we're not feeling so good.
Mm-hmm. And you work in the public realm. How is this accepted by the public?
Well, I think it's new, relatively new. It's somewhat on the periphery, but becoming increasingly popular with people who understand that healthcare ultimately is an individual responsibility and that high-tech medical care can only take us so far. It's powerful and it works. There are wonderful medicines and surgery and so on and so forth. But if we focus only there, it's reductionistic, so we need psychosocial and spiritual elements of healing. And I think most doctors are aware of it. Some are resisting, but there's a term now called integrative medicine, which is biopsychosocial and spiritual, and it includes the healing power in all four realms.
Great. And you've written a book about pain management. Can you talk about that?
Yes. For a long time I've known that belief systems have had something to do with health and healing and pain management, and wrote a paper about that many years ago, around 1980, and taught it to my students and anybody who would listen to me. But when mind-body medicine came in terms of the scientific proof of it, that stimulated me to do a little bit more. And then at the clinic that I work in, a local mental health center in Portland called Cascadia Behavioral Healthcare, at one time there was a survey amongst the clients asking people what kind of groups they would like, and we sent the survey out to each of our consumer or clients and asked which of 30 plus other that they would like to have if we were to do some groups. Spirituality and healing came out number one. I was known at the time as the meditating doctor or the spiritual doctor, maybe because of my high forehead or whatever the secret was, but they asked me if I'd do the group, and of course I jumped on the opportunity and put together a manual on spirituality and healing, and people really liked it. And that stimulated me to get up at 3 and 4 in the morning. I found myself at the computer with everything that I had learned over the 30, 35 years of my seeking coming out in the computer, and ultimately I got some help from some very knowledgeable people about how to at least approach writing a book.
Okay.
And it came out as this book right here called Healing Power, 10 Steps to Pain Management, Pain Management and Spiritual Evolution.
And what are some of those 10 steps then?
Well, very briefly, the summary of it would be I've been tracking two forces as a physician. One is pain and suffering as a universal item on the table, that people come to you with their pain and say, take it away, because I don't like it and I'm afraid. So I've been just following pain as the teacher, and then following the antidote to that, which is the healing power, that incomparably brilliant healing power that operates the cells and knows how to heal. It's infinitely intelligent. I think it's part of omniscience. And so the way the model came out, the first 5 steps has to do with the evolution of suffering. It's about the inevitable suffering of life that the Buddha spoke about, and how we make it worse by developing bad habits and by being highly reactive mentally and emotionally.
What are some bad habits, for example, that you can get?
Some pesky habits. The big ones are food, alcohol and drugs, shopping, hyperactivity, codependency. People are workaholics. People don't know how to stop doing what they do. So eventually, what happens is if we're looking to the world to answer the call of meaning and purpose, and we're not developing our inner being, eventually we get stuck in a rut. So you can get into a habit pretty much on anything. TV, computers, books and movies, almost anything can become a compulsion. So that's got to do with, in part, with the evolution of suffering. And so in terms of healing, we need an answer to that. And so in this model, the second 5 steps have to do with getting to that expanded healing power by practicing certain spiritual methods to cultivate spiritual qualities in response to our pain.
So what are some of those spiritual qualities that could respond to the pain?
Step 7 is called the soul and higher power, or spirit. And I tried to define the nature of the soul or spirit as what if we took all of the great religions and all the great spiritual models and put it into a whirring blender and spun it at high speed until it became a liquid, and then took a filter and poured this liquid through the filter, and everything that wasn't absolutely essential came through the filter, and what was held back was the absolute extract of religion or spirituality. And what would that be? So for over 30 years, in studying spiritual people and spiritual ideas, spiritual books, or anytime I had a spiritual experience, I tried to put it into a single word. I asked myself, if this would be put into a single word, what would it be? And I collected them over the years, like people collect coins or stamps or butterflies or money or whatever. And I ended up with 100 of them, and I called it the spiritual alphabet, and labeled it love with a capital L to reflect its divine nature. But it could be called power or wisdom or truth, Some people call it the Buddha or God or the soul or the Atman or the Tao. It doesn't matter what it's called. But I think it has something to do with love. And the qualities are unconditional love, forgiveness, compassion, understanding, patience, kindness, sweetness, positive thought, pure consciousness, and a host of others. So cultivating these qualities, I think, are the healing powers. And we can make them grow by practicing spiritual methods such as affirmations, deep abdominal breathing, meditation, mindfulness, meditation, service, yoga, the transformation of emotion, and a few others. So the essence of this model is what I call a universal wheel. Find a problem, practice a method, cultivate a quality. So it's problem, method, quality. And I think that that's necessary in order to have more skillful pain management and more healing power. And if we do this, we evolve spiritually, meaning not necessarily that we're, quote, spiritual or religious people, but these spiritual qualities are growing, and we feel better, and people actually feel better around us.
You said you work with groups. Have you seen this with the people you worked with?
When we first started the group at Cascadia, I was told by the clients who came to the group that they had never felt that respected in all of their years in mental health, that somebody was talking about meaning and purpose. How can psychiatry exist without talking about why we're here? And what is the meaning of life and suffering? And how do we position ourselves in this very confusing maze that we're running in? So the core of any kind of healing or therapy has to be about the spiritual life. Why am I here? And what am I supposed to be doing with all this time? And what do I do with this suffering? So people felt very respected, and actually the groups are still going. One of them is going on at Northeast Mental Health and is now a self-help group. I'm no longer in it, but it runs by itself. And I am still involved with one of the groups at a training institute that I work in on Monday and Thursday nights, and where I'm teaching this book.
Right. And can you talk about those big questions again? How do people handle those big questions if you're going to raise them in groups?
Well, I think most of the time people don't want to look at the mystery of suffering and the mystery of evil and the terrors and rigors that go with standing in the unknown without the answer. And I don't actually profess to know the answer, but what I like to do is float the options. So if this is a mystery and we're playing Clue and it's a puzzle and we're trying to figure it out, what have the great masters and saints and sages said about this? Well, they talk about God is love, but he works in strange and mysterious ways. Or in the East, in Hinduism and Buddhism, it's spoken about as karma and reincarnation. An atheist would say there is no answer or purpose. An agnostic would say, I'm not sure, or I don't know. So what I like to do is say, well, you could be atheist, agnostic, religious, or spiritual. And actually, in my group, and the way I approach people, that's not my concern. I think that's more like the car you drive. I think the destination has to do with love and the cultivation of spiritual qualities and becoming a more skillful pain manager. Because I think the cells of the body are looking for peace and happiness, and they want us to enjoy life. And then the healing power is facilitated. I don't think the cells of the body care about our theology or lack of theology.
More skillful pain manager. That's an interesting title. Can you tell us more about that? How do we
I think
do
of,
that?
the Buddha started out with the Four Noble Truths, saying life is painful, and here's why I think so, and here's what I think you could do to at least eliminate some of it, or contain it, or be a better pain manager. So I think the Buddha was a great pain manager. And I think of Christ on the cross saying, forgive them, for they know not what they do, as probably the greatest, most skillful pain management event in the history of the world. And it makes us step back in shock, awe, and wonder, like, how could that be? How could a man do that? So pain management, I think, is inseparable. Skillful pain management is inseparable from spiritual evolution.
Okay. You talked about meditation, and you teach meditation. How do you do that?
How to meditate?
How to meditate? How do you teach it?
Well, there's a number of different levels. Herbert Benson is a physician from Harvard who discovered what he called the relaxation response and proved it in the lab. Now, this is Western science, right? We're not talking about ancient thousands of years of culture of people knowing how to do these things. But in our so-called modern era, it came to the attention of Western physicians and Western therapists, Western healing models, that if you simply focus on a single point, even if it's a pencil and your eyes are opened, but just focusing the mind on a single point causes everything to slow down. The pulse slows, the respiration slows, the blood pressure goes down, the basal metabolic rate goes down, and the EEG calms down, that's the brain waves, and the EMG, the muscle waves, calm down. So simply focusing on anything is good for the body, and it increases the healing power. But it goes on from there, because if people get into stillness in a deeper way, something very phenomenal happens, which is the cultivation of these wonderful spiritual qualities. Slowly, over weeks, months, and years, grow to the point where a person starts to feel better in every domain, and it starts to generalize into every domain of their lives. And then if they meditate deeper and longer still, there's yet another level that occurs that has to do with transformation of consciousness, so that there's an entrance into an actual other domain. People refer to as the peace that surpasses understanding, pure joy, ecstatic love, unfathomable stillness, and intuitive knowledge, cosmic light, cosmic sound. These are words that mystics over the ages have tried to use to describe these very powerful special experiences that can't be described ultimately with words, of course, because it's beyond the mind. But it's suffice it to say that it's better than the little joys on the material plane. The big joy on the spiritual plane is much bigger and much better, but it takes a lot of work and a long time to get to that.
A lot of work, huh? You're a psychiatrist. Can you speak about how medication fits in with all of this?
I'm an integrative medicine person, so I believe biopsychosocial spiritual. So medicines are very helpful for some people. For other people, they're less helpful, and for some, they're not helpful. So if you divide problems up into, say, mild, moderate, severe, and extreme, mild hurts, and sometimes actually a lot. So when you get in, but I don't usually use medicines with mild pain, but when things get into moderate or severe or extreme, then I will pose the option of medicines to my patients or clients and do informed consent and risk-benefit analysis, and in a partnership make a decision of what might be of use, and then go into trial and error and fine-tuning and see if we can help people reduce the pain from extreme, severe, or moderate to mild or none, and then they can do the psychosocial and spiritual work. So medicines facilitate the healing in the other realms for some people.
Okay. And before we start talking about Frank's book, would you like to give us any more information about your book or your methods in it?
Well, let's see if I have a quote here. So, life is school, pain is the teacher, if we let it be, and the lessons have to do with the cultivation of spiritual qualities. The biggest trick in this is to understand that to get more and more of that, you have to shift your locus of control from outside to inside, because the capital letter love, or the capital letter of all these spiritual qualities, is in here. We can get some of it out here, but we can't get it all, and we try to get too much of it out here, we get stuck in a rut and start spraying mud, right? So I think the trick is to shift to the inner being and start working from the inside out rather than the outside in. And so when I'm an old man, because I guess I'm getting kind of close now, I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to have more inner locus of control than outer, because then I'll be more even-minded under all conditions.
Great. Thank you, Phil. And Frank, let's start talking about your book. How did it get started? How did you get these ideas?
Well, it got started in a kind of a startling way, because it was predicted way back in '91 when I happened to visit a medium in London, And she said that one day teachings would come through to me, like from a master. And, you know, I was very moved by the whole ambience of that reading. And when I came back to Portland, I thought, oh, I should really take this to heart. And I invited a few friends to sit with me and to see if something would come through. And gradually, over time, this became a way for me to just open up, become totally blank, and then allow some words to come through. And then in the last couple of years, I started taping them and sending them out to people. And then because of the reactions, I was encouraged to make it into a book.
So these words are coming through. Do you feel them coming through, or how does that?
Yes, I actually feel them like in the heart space. So first they come as a movement, and they're not formulated yet. And then all of a sudden, there's like a verbal package that comes, and they are spread into the space.
And what kind of messages are coming through? What are they about?
They are always about love. They are about taking responsibility. They are about getting in touch with our true nature. They are also coming out of a concern for the planet, not in any kind of doomsday vibrations, but that it's time to wake up, that the planet wants it, that everybody on the planet wants it, and that we are all one. And so that when one of us wakes up, that this is beneficial for everybody else.
What does wake up mean?
I think waking up means to be more present to who we truly are, because typically we are identified with mental constructs, and they take us away from this moment. And a lot of it is about material possessions or material status, or frankly a lot of it is based on fear and separation. So waking up is seeing that that's what it's not about. So that's like the first step, to see what doesn't work. And then, as Dr. Shapiro was saying, then often there's moments of stillness, and then in that stillness something else is revealed, which on an experiential level feels much more important.
And you also work with healing too, as Dr. Shapiro, but in a different sense. What kind of work do you do?
Yes, mostly the healing modalities that I use are the Reiki healing and then shamanic healing.
And please tell us, what is Reiki and what is shamanic healing?
Reiki usually works with hands-on, where you channel a loving, kind of a higher frequency of energy, and it spreads itself through the body of the person. And it harmonizes the chakras. It has beneficial effects for the organs. And so typically people after a session feel revitalized. Their immune system is stronger. And sometimes they have more insights in what's going on in their life. It's a very loving vibration that comes through in Reiki.
You mentioned chakras. I'm going to ask you, what is a chakra? Because maybe people don't know.
Yes, that's right. The chakra system is a system that runs through the body, and very often if a chakra is not in balance, then after a while this will have some effects on the physical. So it's a non-physical energy system, but that's still very present. And so in a Reiki session you can actually feel it. You can feel if it's blocked or if it wants to open up. And so the Reiki energy mostly purifies the chakra system.
Okay. And what is shamanic work? You mentioned that before.
Yes. Shamanism is an age-old way of connecting with nature. And usually in the form of shamanism that I practice, we use a drum, and the drum connects with the heartbeat and often will induce people to a slight trance state where they shift from the left brain to the right brain. And so in that part of the brain there is more access to visions, and it empowers people. And often people feel like they come home to something that they already knew. It's a kind of a primal and very direct way of accessing people's energy systems.
Is shamanism accepted by the public, general public now, or how is it?
Well, a lot of people don't know about it, but it's much more popular than it used to be. When I immigrated from Belgium, my home country, to the States in '85, I actually was surprised. There was a shamanic store here in Portland Whereas where I came from, it was, I mean, we were just a handful that was studying with one of the famous European shamans, but we were so few. But in the last 20 years, that has shifted. Like everything, of course, in the New Age movement, there is a lot of interest now in shamanism. Also in England, many shamans are active there.
And I think you did some work with OHSU, with the Reiki field, so there's been some studies about Reiki also. And
yes, lately, that's right. Lately there have been regular medical studies on Reiki, and all of them point to the fact that the immune system is strengthened by receiving Reiki, and that the healing process happens much more quickly.
Great. Can you give us some quotes from your book, then, to give us an idea what's in it?
I would love to. I would love to. Actually, if I may read a longer one, this one came through on the day, it's a couple of years ago, that Mount St. Helens was rumbling. And so that day in the meditation, the following text came through. The earth lives. The earth is sacred. The earth is your body. She is sending signals to you constantly. Listen deeply so that you may resonate in partnership with this wise one who leads the transformation. White buffalo calf maiden is handing you the pipe. Consider to smoke it with respect, to purify, to support the awakening of all beings. May your prayers go forth in all directions and circle the globe many times, and then come back into your own heart. You are being asked to start afresh, to align with your true nature. This is not as difficult as you think. It simply means going with the flow, going with the times, going with evolution. Once you say yes, a whole new paradigm, perfectly in sync with your willingness to show up, will be activated. Your practice of sitting together in silence bonds you deeply with yourself, with each other, and with this earth. All is home. All is sacred.
And how do people react when they hear these things?
Well, when people come to meditate, these texts come through spontaneously, and it draws people into a very deep state of meditation. And so between the texts, there's often long periods of silence, of about 5-6 minutes of silence. And the silence is almost palpable. It deepens. And so when we finish our meditation after 45 minutes, all of us feel like we have been blessed by something luminous. And then strangely enough, I had not anticipated this, but when it's put on page and it's being read again, then sometimes there's again the same infusion of energy that comes. So some people, love to get these on a regular basis. They say it comes on their screen and it interrupts their daily routines and it kind of throws them back to their own self. So it's been a great joy for me to send these out to people. Yeah,
how does it feel for you to put it from the oral tradition into the written tradition?
Well, I must say I love it. Initially, I was a little bit afraid that the same depth that we have in the meditation would not come through. But apparently this works on other levels as well and still seems to reflect the source where it comes from. So I'm happy with the transition.
Good. And I think, like Dr. Shapiro, the traditions in your book are from various traditions, right, and not just one. So
yes,
that's an interesting. What traditions actually are mentioned?
Well, actually, not many traditions are mentioned by name, but every so often there will be like a Hindu flavor, or like in the one I just read, there's more a Native American flavor. Then sometimes it's more the Christ energy that comes through. Sometimes Buddha is mentioned. And very often it is said that, now is the time that the deep core truths of all spiritual systems really reflect the same essence. And that it's so wonderful about this time that all these are coming together.
Can you speak more about that? That's an interesting point.
Well, Yes, so as we all know, typically religions have a history of fighting with each other, and sometimes spiritual systems have that too. So now it seems there is much more openness and a recognition that we have to work together, you know, that all of us are light workers, and it's across cultures. And also what often comes through in these meditations is that there is a descent of the divine feminine, which is meeting the divine masculine, so that there is a unification of what is typically called the male and the female forces, and that they can work hand in hand. So it's a very interesting time right now where all this is happening.
And if I've never heard about the divine masculine or divine feminine, can you tell me a little bit more about that? What does that mean?
Well, I would think of qualities such as surrender. So instead of trying to control life, you surrender to intuition.
And this is for which one, the masculine or the feminine?
I would say mostly for the feminine.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas sometimes the masculine is the protector. Like, of course, with the wars going on, there is some kind of a deep need that we have to protect our planet, to stand up also. So it's a spirituality that wants to engage itself, but not in an oppressive way, mostly in looking at the ecosystem within all of us, and then by taking that, by putting that into the light, counting on it, that this will spread, a bit like Dr. Shapiro was saying, when you do this for a while, there is an ambience that gets created around us, and people may get inspired by that. And so maybe the quote that I may read about, if I can find it, the body heals cell by cell, humanity heals person by person, the world heals nation by nation. So that's kind of the vision that's in here, that it's all connected on the cellular level, then person to person, I mean like the three of us sitting here and dialoguing about this, and then of course on the level of nations, where today whatever happens somewhere on the planet affects all of us.
And getting back to the book, what do you hope with the book, what will happen with it? And how
Well, it's already happened. I
Oh.
get beautiful reactions. It's wonderful that people, what people do is they open the book and they just synchronistically, they see a passage and it goes into their heart and it means something to them. And so I get reactions about that. And that makes me happy, you know, that, I mean, I have a very small group of meditators, maybe 6 to 12 people, and then this reaches out to hundreds of people, so that's really wonderful for me.
Dr. Shapiro is talking about pain management. Can you talk about some of your own personal pain management? How do you work with pain yourself?
Well, it is true that through meditation, a lot of the mental anguish vanishes. I mean, of course, it does happen that I'll have like a difficult night, and then I start to meditate, and after 10, 15 minutes of meditation, whatever had been troubling me, and I don't always know whether it's personal or collective, that it is clear through the meditation. So for me, following the breath, sitting in meditation really brings peace of mind. And so far I've been blessed with a very good health myself, but I must say through the Reiki healings that I offer to people and the shamanic healings, and through the meditations that many people also I helped on the physical level. So in my practice, and I'm sure in your, we see this all the time, that this really works. You know.
Great. To go back to both of you now, I want to hear a little bit more about your own personal stories of seeking and finding these truths, actually, because it sounds like some of it was similar. And when you were children, did you ever think you're going to be a psychiatrist or a shaman, or what did you think you're going to be doing?
I was very confused. I had no idea what I was going to be doing. I was born and raised in a Jewish tradition of conservative, which is in between Reform and Orthodox. Doesn't mean I was a Republican.
Okay.
And that means a certain kind of set of practices, keeping kosher. You have a bar mitzvah, you marry a Jewish girl, and come over to your parents on Friday night and have supper and raise your grand. You know, it's going to be very tribal
Okay.
and wonderful qualities are taught. The values are very high. It has to do with community and service and love and humor, and the cooking is great. But for me, it wasn't giving me the traction that I needed to grow spiritually. It was more of a psychological and cultural identity. I could never have said this at the time, you know, this is what I learned later, what was happening, but it unraveled. I ate a cheeseburger, which is like, you're not supposed to
You're
do
not
that.
supposed to do that? Okay.
And it was the beginning of the unraveling. And it went all the way to the abyss, like there's no answer, right?
Wow.
I'm here all by myself and I'm going to die. Being scared and uncomfortable and having a lot of issues, as people say, I became a seeker. And when I went out through the psychological systems and the spiritual systems, and I bobbed and weaved my way through the teachers and the models. And if anybody said to me, I'm not going to tell you what to do, I'm going to tell you what I learned, and I expect you to try it for yourself and see what happens, that I could hear.
Okay.
When I had people telling me, this is the way, and you're either in or out, in terms of, you know, the way some true believing systems operate, I wasn't inclined to go that way. So I went on this great exploration and tested and tried methods. And if something worked, I kept it, and if it didn't, I would toss it. And I ended up with my own, you know, personal, private, spiritual practice, which is, you know, basically the kind of car I drive. But I think the product is going to LA in that car, so to speak, meaning the spiritual qualities. So, you know, the way I judge myself and others, frankly, is this love or something else? And the something else is big.
Yeah. Right.
It's like a very large category that we could call a garbage can. And it's loaded with junk. And then there's love, right? And the love has to do with these fabulous qualities that need to be cultivated a little bit every day for the rest of my life and hopefully other people's lives. It's about love and something else.
Okay. How about your personal journey?
Well, I wrote a bit about that in the introduction to my book. A defining moment really was when I had a near-death experience when I was 4, because that's my earliest memories. And what was intriguing about that was that I knew, something in me knew that I was not going to die. So for maybe a day and a half, I was hovering in between this reality and what seemed like another reality. And the other reality was very loving, very filled with light, and there was beings there that seemed to help me. And I also felt the love of my parents. They were very concerned about me. But I also could feel that because of their concern, they were so distraught, they couldn't really energetically help me. And then when I came out of that, I was just a little bit different from my fellow mates. And I never would talk about it. It was something, it was like a private experience. I held it. I think I protected it. But I assumed that's the beginning of unconscious seeking. And I came from a Catholic background, not devout Catholic, but still in Belgium in those days, everybody. And I remember at 12 you do something called the Holy Communion, and I must say that day I did have glimpses of past life experiences. So somehow there was still something that was passed on in that ritual. And then I left the church when I was 14. It didn't feel real, and and my seeking really started when I was 21. I started to meditate on a daily basis, and then things really shifted. Quite a few mystical experiences, seeking a lot at first in the East, and then finally coming back to my roots in a way, and having experiences in churches and going to power places, and meeting a lot of teachers, some of the famous ones like Krishnamurti and Trungpa, Osho, and some shamanic teachers. And I still remember the first time I saw a demonstration of my shamanic teacher that the hair on my arms, they stood up. There was some visceral, like, what is this? And I had never heard of shamanism, really. And I was hooked. Every week I went to visit my teacher. And it was a great adventure. And I never thought that one day I would be doing this myself, or would be sitting here and having a book. That was the furthest of my... Yeah. All this was a passion that I felt. I didn't know anything. Actually, I still feel that today. And it's been an incredible journey. It's I feel, when I look back on my life, it's amazing that I have met the people whom I have met, and I'm so grateful to them and hold them dear in my heart. And it keeps unfolding. I really don't know what's next.
And I want to ask you, both of you work with people in immense pain, and how do you do that and still keep your own self healthy?
Some kind of balance that occurs over the years that has to do with being in it. At the same time, a part of me is not, right? A part of me is observing and aware and working to help, and another part of me is right there in it. And by having that combination of a compassionate detachment or a detached compassion, so I'm not like an icy surgeon just, you know, putting somebody to sleep and making an incision, but I'm not at the same time getting wrapped up in it and going into the hurricane, because then I can't help or serve. So somewhere in between, and there is a spot where you can stay balanced and still give without getting absorbed in the twirl, so to speak.
And how about you? How do you...
Yes, for me it's similar, and also I should say, not all the people that I work with are in immense. Some of them are, but most of them are not. So my practice is more balanced that way. And it's true, when somebody comes with pain, it does open my heart. And I try not to take it personal. I try to see the wholeness of the person. And mostly I feel I'm just a vessel or a channel of this loving energy. So the energy comes through and feeds me as well. So it happens, of course, some days, you know, by the end of the day I'm tired like everybody else doing a job. But mostly I actually feel energized in my work. And I feel it's a great privilege that I am allowed into people's healing process.
What is the difference between healing and cure?
Oh yes, good question.
For me, the cure is like if you have pneumonia and you take penicillin, the pneumonia goes away. Healing can occur even if the disease or disability remains, because healing has to do with the psyche and the heart and the soul. And that is the part of ourselves that ultimately can't be touched. But we have to know how to access it and how to enter it and how to increasingly improve our ability to stay there. And that's what I think spiritual practices are for, like meditation. So, you know, tying that into the prior question is that by meditating in the morning and in the evening, it helps me do what I do during the day, which is see a lot of people who are in a lot of trouble.
You speak about healing and cure?
Yes, I would concur with that.
Yeah.
Healing often, a healing crisis is often a messenger of something that needs to happen. So it's often a gift. Of course, you know, you cannot always say that to people when they are in pain, but often it
not
is
a good
it's
idea.
A gift.
No,
Right.
no,
It's like,
no. But at least
Yeah.
for myself,
Okay.
you know, because I often know that people will discover something about themselves that will help them to go to a deeper part of themselves.
do you ever say, like, what is the meaning of this cold?
Well, with a cold.
Somebody comes in with pneumonia. What do you think the psychological dynamics are of your pneumonia, right?
Well, but sometimes actually people even volunteer, because today a lot of people are aware of, you know, of the connection. So sometimes people will say, well, you know, something needs to shift in my life. And in a way, then we're in business, because then we're a team, then we can look at it together. Yeah.
Great. Can you talk about timing? So if I start meditating and if I start getting some spiritual qualities, how fast can I get better and heal?
Timing is something I don't get into, because I don't think the schedule of my growth or other people's growth is actually up to me. I think my job is to practice the methods, and that when the product shows up, that's the gift or the grace. So I put the schedule on somebody else's turf. I think it comes from the vertical axis. I think it comes down. That the door opens when it opens, that the pain, the condition, the barrier, the whatever the karma or the painful problem is going to be there until it's going to not be there. But my job is cultivating love and her cohort spiritual qualities.
Well, I encourage people to, and I know in your book you do the same, to have a regular practice. But I also know that people come at the right time. Sometimes people tell me, years ahead of time, one day I want to come to meditate, and they never show up. And then one day they're there, and that's the day it starts. And so in my own practice, I'm there every day. And so when people want to, they are always welcome. But also I feel it's everybody's responsibility to do it. And I also see when people make time for it, they do feel better consistently.
It's difficult to sit still and not get up. And, the mind is basically saying, what have you done for me lately? So, like, where are we going now? Like, when you meditate, and it's like, so what time is the ball game start? Or when can I get a cheeseburger? Or whatever it is that it wants to do. So it's just running and trotting off. So it's very hard to sit still. For most people, moving towards stillness occurs because not doing it is worse. It's usually not a proactive choice. Most people don't study for the final, right? So there are pop quizzes, right? So how many times do you get popped in the quiz before you're going to proactively meditate? For me, fortunately, and I think in some ways you could say unfortunately, but I started early with a lot of pain. So that forced me to the seeker mode. The people that I see around me who are well balanced, they look at the life that I lead, the practices that I'm up to in the book that I wrote as a point of interest. But it's not something that they're interested or going to do. And like you, I know that the timing of it is not mine. So whoever shows up, it's time, and when they don't, it's not time. But again, I think pain is usually the teacher, unfortunately.
Pain is the teacher.
Pain is usually the teacher.
So life is school, you're saying?
Life is school.
Okay. Can you talk more about how life is school?
Well, it's like, what class are you in? I'm not asking you to answer that,
Right.
but just the generic you or me. Life is school. What classes are we in? Some of the classes are pretty rugged. Others are, more fun. And sometimes life isn't school. Sometimes it's entertainment, and sometimes it's just doing chores or hanging out. But when the pain comes, I like to frame it as, school is in, right? I'm in class. There is a teacher. And so it's pneumonia or whatever. For me, it's like, what am I to get from this? It's not just coming from nowhere. I'm supposed to get something from this. And over the years, I've decided what I'm supposed to get has something to do with the spiritual qualities. So I just look in my book on page 34. There's 100 of them, and I read them, and I go, which ones do I need for this particular class? And start working to cultivate those with whatever spiritual methods seem indicated at the time. And I go to work. I turn the tables on the pain and treat it as an invited guest in my house rather than an uninvited guest that I resist.
You invite the pain. That's
Well, the pain has already invited itself, right? So rather than have the pain in there as an uninvited guest means I then have two problems, right? So I'm going to invite the guest. Oh, you're here and I can't kick you out, right? What do you want? Why are you here? What am I supposed to get? What am I missing? Is there something? And then because it still doesn't, just talk to me and give me the answer. So I have to sit with it, and I go to the qualities, and I start working from there. Those are my clues.
Okay.
Well, similarly, I definitely in my own life, I try to use whatever comes my way as some kind of a lesson. And not in a negative sense, like there is a pressure on me, but it makes it more interesting. Why am I here? Why am I here tonight? What is the purpose of our being together? And I try to share that with people. And I also think that collectively we are taking through certain lessons, you know. And
Collectively, what does that mean, collectively?
Well, I mean, this is just a personal opinion rather than a teaching, but I think we can no longer afford collectively to continue engaging in war. We just can no longer do it. And that's the curriculum we're in, to see that it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. So we need to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
We need to go to the heart. So in that sense, it's a very interesting time because there is more pressure in that way. It's like the bar is up a bit now.
Yeah.
We need to go to the heart. You know, we can no longer afford not to do it. So in that sense, we are in school.
Some people, teachers refer to individual karma and mass karma. And assuming that frame for the moment, the mass karma now is at a point where we're on the brink.
Yes.
And so unless we collectively get more conscious rather than stay collectively unconscious, then we are in potential dire straits.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that. And that's probably also the reason why so many people are starting to seek. There is now many, many, many seekers on the planet. And so that's gaining some momentum as well. So there is these balancing forces.
So can you speak a little bit about what the United States is going through now as a population or through these methods?
I think that there are more and more people who are understanding that the change has to come from inside out and collective work, that we have to work both ways. I think the hope, I see the dark forces adding up and collecting and getting deeper. So it seems to me that, speaking from a karmic point of view, that the karmic debt is rather enormous, and that it's, you know, to some extent, or to a significant extent, under the surface for us in this country. In others, it's rampant on the exterior. But I feel at some point it's going to come out. And I'm feeling that the pain, life of school pain, is the teacher, if we let it be, is that as collective events get rougher, the community and the spiritual qualities get bigger, because it has to, because that's where our survival is. After 9/11, New York City was a spiritual commune, and then of course it dissipated. That happens with individuals. When we're in crisis, our heart cave is opened. When things calm down, we go bowling.
Bowling, huh? Do you have anything to say about the...
Yes, well, I have a chance. I go twice a year. I go to Europe where I teach similar classes, and I must say in Europe there is still more connectedness and the social systems are better. Just yesterday I read a staggering statistic by Bill Moyers, was quoting this in a lecture he was giving, that in this country the wealth of the 1% on top is bigger than the wealth of the 90% of the households on the bottom. So that disparity is very strong in this culture, which does produce anxiety. Most people in Europe, when they're out of a job, there is still a network that protects them. So there is a sense, in a way, that the system is not just. I mean, it isn't just. And so that's one of the spiritual values, that there is justice for everybody. Now, at the same time, this culture is very enterprising, which I love as Europeans. Sometimes things are very traditional there and quite judgmental. Here, you know, it's enterprising, and people are willing to move and change jobs and all of that. So I came for some of these qualities to this culture. But at the same time, I do feel that this culture does need to change. I mean, materialism can only go so far, and it feels like it's gotten all the way to one side, and it needs to go back to spiritual values. It has to.
Great. Well, we are ending up, so I'd like to thank you very much. And would you like to read some more from your books then, or some more quotes as we end up, and anything else you'd like to say about your books?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I would like to read. It's my wife's favorite one, so I'm going to look for it. It's on page 251. And it has a curious reference to Atlantis in it, and also to some of what we just talked about the curriculum. Souls incarnate in groups and are here to learn successive lessons. The general lesson bears repeating. You are not the body, you are not the mind. You are the consciousness that is able to perceive the body and the mind. Often a reorientation takes place in your life as you investigate this proposition. For this witnessing consciousness, death is not so daunting. It is a transition, most likely an initiation, and probably a continuation. This time the world is learning very specific lessons, to share resources willingly, to listen to all points of view, to forgive oneself and others, and to open oneself to healing and transformation. You have a place in this. The members of your soul group are encouraging you, and the choices you make touch the lives of many. It would be senseless to repeat Atlantis. The opening of the heart is the greatest miracle. Om Shanti.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Dr. Shapiro?
This is the final paragraph in my book, and I refer to the great physician as the higher power. The great physician prescribes love as the medication for all of our ills. Follow love and keep your eyes opened. It will take you where you need to go. Even if you must pass through the cave of darkness, love will light the way. Let your pain take you to the next level of higher consciousness. For every problem you navigate, you rise. When you complete all of your problems, you will rise above all of creation. Then you will know the foundation of the universe is eternal peace, omniscient love, and ecstatic joy.
Thank you very much. Anything else before we go?
It's been a joy to be together and talking about this.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, thank you. This is The Spirit of Healing with Dr. Phil Shapiro and Frank Coppieters, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
try anything once. What the heck, right? It'll never come around again. Eat that bumblebee, that pickled bumblebee in front of you. Try it, you know? It's okay. Get up there and sing that karaoke song all by yourself, even though you can't carry a tune, you know? That you would never imagine that you would do that in front of a group like this, for example, right? What if we turned the music on and everybody had to come up here and sing a song right now, you know? How horrible would that be? But you're going to do that in Japan, in front of a whole bunch of Japanese people, yeah! Okay? So try, because it's all about being part of the group and all about just experiencing Japan and enjoying it. And it will, you know, change your life forever. You'll come back to America and you'll be like these JET alumni wanting to share the gospel with everybody else. Maybe you'll end up working in a university, you know, sharing international things for the rest of your life, or be like Kasper, who's going to teach a bunch of my students this summer. You know. So I wish you the best. I wish you the worst also, because I want you to experience everything, and I hope you'll come back and be a really good JET alumni and help all your friends and followers the next year, okay? And I hope you have a really, really great time. That's it. Thanks.